introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Julio Galarz. I am a peer support facilitator for HIV-CL based in Calgary. I'm also an HIV survivor. I was diagnosed with full-blown AIDS in March 2010. And with the support of my partner of 34 years and the medical team from Southern Alberta Clinic, I was able to cope with the isolation and stigma associated with HIV. Now, shortly after my diagnosis, I met with Patricia Miller, then a counselor at SAC. I worked with her for over 2 years. After speaking with Patricia, I wanted to volunteer to become a peer support facilitator as well as a peer navigator for serodiscordant couples. Initially, we had little success with the undertaking, so I took the initiative to make the group all-inclusive. That is to say, for all the LGBT community as well as heterosexuals. So we develop the slides. No, I did the introduction already.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. Okay. After experiencing isolation and stigma after my diagnosis, I wanted to create a group that would foster a sense of community. If I could overcome those obstacles, I felt that I could do the same thing for others. So I created a pamphlet and posters for the organization that is called Plus Friends Calgary. Now, my previous experience from the pain clinic, coupled with Patricia Miller's guidance, were instrumental for the development of Plus Friends. This is a dedicated outlet for those people living with HIV. So, outlining the goals and concepts of the groups, we discuss social stigma, coexisting conditions, relationships, lifestyle, medications, personal goals, and other relevant topics. So I placed these pamphlets at various sites, such as Southern Alberta Clinic, the STI, the Char Foundation, and I also took the initiative to post an ad on Craigslist, as well as various theme gay apps. Now, the response broke down to 60% were actually from the gay apps, and 40% were from Southern Alberta Clinic. Now, it is necessary to make sure that there is a credibility for those responding from those gay apps. Consequently, I have developed a checklist that is part of the vetting process. So the questions include, who is your HIV doctor? What kind of medications are you taking? What is your CD4 count? So this ensures that the prospective peers are in earnest. Initially, the group, we met at an antique store that was actually owned by a gay couple where they were both positives as well as they were my peers. Now, at that time, there was a little funding, which meant that I have to use my own resources, such as my personal cell and my email. So we stayed in that location for 1 year, and then we moved to the Char Foundation site. As you all know, the Char Foundation is a nonprofit and a charitable organization that provides housing for those living with HIV. And they also care for people with complex health and social needs. Later, the funding was absent for a period of 6 months, and that meant that we needed to share the cost of our meals in the group and any outings we undertook. Now, I'm going to review some of the guidelines that I practice with my group. Now, the group aims to create a safe space for our fellow peers, and that means finding a location that is suitable for our purposes. So here is a brief overview of the guidelines. Now, confidentiality is important, of course, because remember, whatever we discuss in the group, it stays in the group. No judgment, so we are not here to judge other people. This is not a teaching seminar, so you are entitled to your own opinions, so please do not force those opinions on others. We practice cell etiquette, we keep it simple, and we introduce ourselves by first name only due to the confidentiality agreement, and we don't interrupt. Now, I'm one of those facilitators where I don't like when people, they tend to correct to other peers, so there is a polite way to provide insight when others talk. So use I instead of you. In other words, said, have the same experience instead of you should or should not be doing. Now, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. There is also a confidentiality agreement which both the facilitator and the peer need to sign and date. Ultimately, I need to determine whether are comparable with other peers. In this model, boundaries are essential for the facilitator. It is imperative that the intake meeting takes place in a safe location, such as a coffee shop or at the agency. Now, we have to, well, myself, I have to consider my own security and safety, of course. So no topic is taboo at our meetings, and anything discussed with the peers is strictly confidential. I revisit the guidelines at each meeting to ensure a safe and friendly atmosphere. Now, we share a meal at the meetings as this promotes a sense of community. Not only that, but it's also a sense of togetherness. Now, the range of topics for discussion is wide, but just to give you a couple of examples, let's say, for example, that I got a new peer to the group, and somebody that is just being diagnosed. So one of the questions that I always ask is, how was your reaction when you were diagnosed for the first time? Or how do you see yourself living with HIV in the future? Now, there is an example that I always use for my best practices, is to model the behavior and attitudes that I want members to employ. And I also use body language and tone of voice as well as words to convey my message. I give positive feedback for joining in the discussion. I always use open-ended questions for further the discussion. Now, it is important to create a respectful atmosphere that includes no judgment or criticism. We aspire to learn from other people's experiences. As a facilitator, I'm only there to listen and to direct the conversation in a safe and respectful manner. It is important to retain a professional relationship with the peers. At times, there will be situations that challenge the guidelines. In these instances, I provide resources for the peers. Follow-up to the monthly meetings is essential. I'm not a social worker, so I cannot dispense professional advice. However, I can communicate from my own stories and from my own experiences. Now, and anybody that needs counseling, I always encourage them to seek appropriate help. I always send a recap of our meetings to my coordinator, and I can talk to her if a problem arises. Progress and evolution.
We're running out of time. Okay. So we're at about 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
We're just sharing our time, so we're just trying to make sure.
Okay, sure. Yeah. Now, progress and evolution.
Okay.
Now, in the 4 years since Plus Friends Inception, we have developed a cohesive group that does define the notion of community. We support each other in difficult times and set goals for ourselves on a month-to-month basis. Peer members in a group have found success in their personal lives and have been able to see their goal reach fruition. Many of the peers have concurrent health issues, which includes diabetics, heart conditions, depression, neuropathy, and hyperic neuralgia. Now, by sharing these issues with fellow peers, we create a support network within the support network, which gives them hope and a better quality of life. I have had clients who have actually left the group after achieving their goals. Although they no longer attend physically, they have remained in touch with me. Some of our peers have found jobs, became volunteers for HIV/CL, and have established relationships and ultimately become productive members of the community. Now, I have a letter that, Patricia, would you like to read?
I think I'll read at the end.
You read at the end?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Now, the next slide. Stay on. How do I stay well? Well, by dressing up, of course. You probably enjoy my pictures from there. Okay. Now, I stay well by exercising regularly, eating well, and taking time to meditate in order to alleviate stress. Now, being in a long-term, stable relationship has actually helped me find grounding. I practice the 5 fundamentals of staying healthy that I learned from the pain clinic, which are, I tend to drink a lot of water, I eat well, I go to bed early, I go to the gym 6 times a week, and I nurture myself. Now, where is that I live by? And I think some of you, they have a motto, and one of my motto is knowing others is actually intelligence. but knowing yourself is a true wisdom. Now, I have the support of my peer coordinator from HIVCL who ensures that my well-being is met. I have also taken steps to ensure that I don't become personally involved in peers' lives. By this means, if a situation arises that is beyond the parameters of the group, I encourage them to call the distress hotline or seek counseling. Now, my job has evolved, so now I am solely a peer support facilitator. In this model, I have more time to concentrate on the facilitation aspect, while others handle the peer navigation as well as the initial intake procedure. Conclusion. The last one. Okay. Do you want to do the conclusion? Just the last one.
Do you want to do that? You want to do it at the end?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay. So first, I just want to say it's always a great honor to be presenting with someone who has the lived experience. And I really want to acknowledge Julio and his dedication to the peer support program that has been developed. Because without him, without his passion to share his story about living well, this program would not be what it is. Because people have come to trust him. They've come to rely on that relationship as a support. They've come to see him as a safe person that they can trust to come into a group and be with other people as people are trying to figure out how to live well. So some of my work, really I was very fortunate to come into this research. It came out of my PhD research. I have 2 masters, one in social work and psychology, which really doesn't mean nothing more than either I like going to school or I'm a little bit crazy, one of the two, maybe a little both. But what it's allowed me to do is to be with people and make sense of experiences and also to make a commitment to helping people and making the world better in some way. And through working with the Southern Alberta Clinic, I had the good fortune of working with Dr. Gill and his medical team, and he allowed me to start a PhD research project that was for serodiscordant couples. Because one thing I began to see was that there wasn't really a safe space, a place that they could come and talk about their story. So the research itself, just to give you a little bit of a framework, and I know I'm going to be short on time, is grounded in postmodern feminist theory, which means all voices matter. The funny version of postmodern feminist theory for me is that we finally figured out as women that we've been blamed for feeding Adam the apple, and then we ask ourselves, why didn't we eat it ourselves? You know, so you kind of work that out along the way. Because we're, classic caregivers, as many people are, but as women we have to come to terms with that. Participatory action research is really about science and action. Let's get together. Forget about the data right now. Let's have some conversations, right? It's not always received as the most scientific, but I am fighting that, and I have gone to the International Conference for HIV, STI, and STD, and I'm going back. They've asked me back for year 2, so I think I'm doing something right. To keynote the value of action-oriented research processes around social stigma. What else should I say on this one? Because I can see, I think that's good to go. Basically, just knowing some of the initial work was grounded in postmodern feminist theory, but it was action-oriented. Gather our people. Hard to get them together when you got social stigma, right? Because good old social stigma, I should put my glasses on so I can see a little better here. There we go. Okay, good old social stigma keeps people from coming together. Why? Because social stigma is a psychological injury. It says you don't matter, you're not good enough. Oh, by the way, I can do anything to you that I want to, and you don't have a right to live in a way that's meaningful for you. We've heard that throughout the day, that people are saying it's our right to love, to have sex, to be together, and to talk about our story. But social stigma gets in the way. So that's one of the things as we began to gather people. Actually, the initial gatherings, we had 20 couples, serodiscordant couples. They came together over a series of meetings, and what came from all of those gatherings is they wanted peer support. And that's how we actually began the peer support process. As we got into peer support, I think some of the issues that really came up, and Julio was a part of that process, as was I in the beginning, but I backed out, thank you, quite quickly, because there's nothing worse than having a professional sitting in a peer support group, because then it's not really about peer support. So it changed the dialogue. But when I was first a part of that process as a co-researcher, because in participatory action research, all people are a part of the research process, we're co-researchers, we noticed social stigma. And it's a psychological injury, which means it causes harm to people. It takes away their inherent right to be treated with respect. And so through the process of peer support and a peer facilitator, you give a safe relationship where people can gather within the parameters of something called peer support. And that came in to be monthly meetings with an opportunity for people to talk about living well. I also promote the idea that that's trauma-informed practice, because any social stigma creates some level of injury. In injury, what do we need? Trauma-informed practices, relationship first. You matter. You don't need to prove to me you matter. You just do. And I want to get to know you, by the way, right? It's just that whole idea. Trauma-informed practice is a safe relationship. You don't have to prove anything. And really, that's where peer support, this is year 3, fully funded. So funding has allowed the peer support model to continue to grow. Stipends are paid to our facilitators. HIV-CL, Community Link, has been key to providing support and space, and they now have it fully staffed with people that can continue to support Julio and other facilitators. And I get the fun work to go out and share knowledge, which I get to do on the behalf of your community, which I'm very honored to do. And I get to meet a lot of great people. And if I have at least a minute, 50 Shades of Grey, why I put that in the title, there is lots of gray around peer support. Bring some really cool people together that want to talk about life, and they attach through relationship, and sometimes it gets a little bit of gray. So the grassroots version is we used to go to a pub, we went to the park, we went wherever we could get some space to talk about what are couples needing for gay and trans people. And next thing you know, we ended up with a more secure space and best practice. But in best practice, you lose some of the grassroots kind of concept, right? And it gets a little bit gray in there, and people fight when you're in, not literally fight, but kind of fight around, if we're giving you funding, we need best practice, which is great, because we keep people safe. We also know we have structure, but sometimes you lose the uniqueness of just bringing people together that want to care about each other and develop a space they can talk and learn how to live well. So that's why I put that term in there, 50 Shades of Grey. And methods, I'll leave it alone. Evolution. I just would like, and I'll just accolade it, because I think it's important to note the people that have been a part of this process from a funding perspective, but a space and a community's perspective.
Sure. Yeah. Finally, I want to thank HIV-CL for providing a space for our meetings, giving me an email and a private number, and also for helping me to grow and acknowledge. And also, I want to thank Positive Action Canada's Innovation Program and acknowledge a community grant from ViV Healthcare. I want to thank Patricia and Millen for being so kind and understanding and such a great mentor. And also want to thank the Sharp Foundation for giving us this space. Now, the result of this success has actually seen the group achieve provincial acknowledgement with other HIV associations seeking to establish their own peer support network. Now, I just want to thank every single one of you that is here today. Please, and if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask.
Okay, that's good. We got 1 minute.
Do you want to read the letter from? I have actually a letter from a former peer that we would like he wants us to read. So.
Do you want to read it?
Oh no, because it's directed to me. So
okay. So, Ken asked us to share this letter at the conference today, and it's his experience of being in the peer support group. So to whom it may concern, I have been HIV positive since 1984. I've seen it all. I was diagnosed in 1988, the year of the Calgary Winter Olympics. I've seen it and lived it through the early days of the health crisis with no treatment, to experimentation drug therapy, to stigma, to cocktail therapies in the later 90s. It was terrifying to see others pass away like the cruel plague that it is. I was told by professionals in the early days to get my life in order and prepare for the worst. It never happened. Partly because I didn't believe it, nor did my close friend, who soldiered on without help of dedicated community services, but there was none. Fast forward to today, where there is so much more hope. What is different now is a peer support group and peer navigation support. Not so much that I need it, but because I can contribute my own life to serve as an example. I applaud Julio for contacting me 3 years ago, and I believe in what he has accomplished and what he's trying to do. No one understands better what we are going through than someone who has gone through it. Above all, it fosters a friendship where it likely wouldn't have occurred under clinical circumstances. It is not just technical. It is also about learning through the experiences of others. It can also be just as simple as holding someone's hand in crisis and saying, I understand. I sincerely hope that others follow in Julio's steps and forge a continued service that is assured to always be there rather than hoped for. My greatest thanks, Ken.
You probably were wondering about my pictures, so those two pictures that were actually posted earlier, one was I marched actually for at the Gay Pride for HIVCL. That one was for the Sharp Foundation. I wanted to look like Jennifer Lopez, but I don't think it did very well. And the other one was like Betty Boop look. That's the Betty Boop look. So, yeah.